The left has very much been trying to destroy Donald Trump. They do not want the voters to put that guy back in office, and they've been using lawfare this year as a means to try and stop him. Now, it's only redounded to his benefit. He's become more popular. His campaign has a lot more donations now. It's kind of blowing up in their face, but it's an awful abuse of our justice system. And here to discuss the latest on that issue is President Trump's attorney. He's a former federal prosecutor and a candidate for attorney general in Missouri as well. Will Scharf joins us again. Hello, Will. Good to have you back with us, sir.
Great to be with you, as always. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. You know, the Supreme Court comes out with this huge decision Monday, the final day that they were in session, where they say that presidents of the United States are indeed entitled to immunity from criminal prosecution for any official acts they take as president. The left is apoplectic about this, but what they're not acknowledging is that this is a pretty clear denunciation of Joe Biden's abuse of power, isn't it, Will?
Absolutely. And if you actually read Chief Justice Roberts' opinion in legalese, he is basically excoriating the prosecution in the lower courts for the way that they have timed these prosecutions in a fundamentally political way. This mad rush to justice, this mad rush to drag President Trump into court. Chief Justice Roberts clearly really doesn't like that. So that's definitely an aspect of this. I think at this point, all of these criminal cases across the board are basically collapsing under their own weight. Immunity obviously applies in D.C., where it presents, I believe, insurmountable challenges to the continuation of that prosecution. We've now gotten a stay of sentencing in New York on the basis of this immunity decision. Judge Merchan's order in that case indicates that he believes that sentencing may not actually occur, that we may be heading for a mistrial. This has implications for Florida. The Georgia case is going nowhere fast. Looking at the broad scope of this campaign of lawfare against President Trump, we are winning. We are going to win, and it has never been clearer than it's been this week that that is, in fact, the truth.
I do want to talk in more detail about how each of these cases are affected by the Supreme Court's decisions in the last week, to include this immunity decision. But let me start with Judge Merchan in New York. The fact that he's delaying sentencing until September, the rationale that he's giving, at least publicly, is, well, we need to take time to review this Supreme Court decision and whether or not it has any impact on this case. There's a part of me that thinks, though, that Merchan has been so out to get your client, President Trump, that part of what he's doing is perhaps delaying the sentencing until just before the election just to cause some more trouble. Am I wrong in making that kind of assumption?
You know, Judge Merchan has really not given us many positive rulings. We were actually very excited by this one. There is this line at the end of his order that says that he's staying sentencing for quite a while, 2 months. And then he says essentially that sentencing may not even be necessary, which indicates that he at least believes that there may be grounds for a mistrial here. Okay. We, of course, believe that the grounds for a mistrial are very strong. There was a lot of evidence introduced at that trial that, based on the Supreme Court's opinion this week, cannot be used as evidence in that case against President Trump. That's pretty clear. That's just what's in the Supreme Court's opinion. Yeah. So we think we now have a very strong ground to toss that jury verdict out. And it seems as though Judge Merchan is at least acknowledging that as a real possibility.
There's Jonathan Turley, a smart attorney who we hear from regularly on Fox News and elsewhere. He's been saying that he's concerned that Merchan will still rule against President Trump here. He suggested that the prosecutors are going to be arguing that the things that now can't be included as evidence will be considered just harmless error, a harmless error defense for the prosecutors, and that Judge Merchan, given his past behavior, which is to constantly rule against President Trump, may actually look upon that argument favorably. What do you think of that idea?
I think we would look to appeal any negative judgment on this ground as quickly as possible. Appeals on immunity grounds are typically allowed on an interlocutory basis. You can take them immediately. New York appellate rules are a little complicated there. But if Judge Merchan tries to fly in defiance of the Supreme Court's opinion here, it's not going to go well for him. The Supreme Court spoke quite decisively on Monday. This was a broad 6-3 opinion that gave us really almost everything that we wanted.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that sort of thing is going to fly here.
Let's talk a little bit more about Jack Smith's cases now, targeting President Trump. This is the special counsel at Biden's Justice Department. So the combination of the immunity decision that we got out of the court and the Fisher case last week about obstruction of an official proceeding in Congress, it seems that a lot of Jack Smith's charges against President Trump are basically incapable of moving forward. How should we view those?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That D.C. case, I wouldn't say it's in hospice care yet, but it's certainly on life support. Between the Fisher case, which directly impacts 2 of the 4 charges in that D.C. prosecution, and then this immunity decision, Jack Smith doesn't have much left to stand on if he wants to carry that case forward. We're obviously going to have to litigate the scope of immunity as it's applied to the facts in that case. Any negative decision there, we'd have a right to immediately appeal again. That case is going nowhere fast. At one point, it appeared to be politically threatening. We've always believed that it was baseless. Now it appears that no substantial action, certainly no trial, is going to occur before President Trump is inaugurated. And I would just say one final thing. This is a familiar situation for Jack Smith. You know, he prosecuted Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell. That case was appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and Jack Smith was reversed 8-0. Jack Smith has a long history of bringing these wildly overbroad, overly aggressive federal prosecutions and then getting smacked down by the higher courts, because what he does is not an even-handed application of the law to facts. It's political prosecution, pure and simple.
I'm pretty convinced that's why Merrick Garland and Joe Biden chose him, actually, because he has no scruples. He's willing to do things that almost no other attorney is willing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption.
So Jack Smith, there was a concurring opinion this week in the immunity case by the great Justice Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas suggested, about as explicitly as you can, that Jack Smith is not even eligible to be a special counsel, that this is an unlawful and unconstitutional position. And by extension, if the courts actually find that, all of these indictments, every single one that Jack Smith has purported to bring, needs to be thrown out. How important is Justice Thomas's opinion in your legal proceedings for President Trump? And will you use his opinion as a means to try and convince the courts that Jack Smith should be thrown out entirely and these indictments should be thrown out entirely?
Absolutely. We've actually already moved to dismiss the Florida indictment, the Florida documents case, on almost exactly the same basis that Clarence Thomas relied on in his concurrence. So we're looking forward to continuing to litigate that issue. We believe we have a good chance of success in front of Judge Cannon in Florida. And if so, that would be earth-shattering. That would obviously impact the Florida prosecution. It would have an immediate impact on the D.C. prosecution as well. And that's another issue that could end up back before the Supreme Court. You know, Justice Scalia wrote perhaps his most famous opinion, a dissent in Morrison v. Olson, over the constitutionality of the prior independent counsel structure. Justice Thomas's concurrence sounds a lot like Justice Scalia's opinion in Morrison. That's a seminal opinion. I think in time, Clarence Thomas's opinion in this case, this separate concurrence on the issue of the constitutionality of Jack Smith as special counsel, will be viewed in a similar way. That was hugely important, and we were very excited when we saw it.
So is that the kind of thing, because I don't understand the legal process here, is that the kind of thing you'd like staple to your filings? Like, hey, by the way, a Supreme Court justice just said this guy is totally invalidated. Do you submit that almost as an amicus brief?
So we've already briefed and actually argued this issue in front of Judge Cannon. You typically submit, it's a supplemental letter. You're informing the court of a new authority that bears on the issue that you've briefed. That's what we're doing in Florida. But certainly if Judge Cannon was wavering on this issue, if she was concerned that maybe she was being too aggressive, maybe she was considering the issue in too aggressive a manner, hopefully this would give her comfort to do the right thing. I think Jack Smith's appointment is blatantly unconstitutional. The funding mechanism being used to fund his office is unlawful. And hopefully we get some relief there.
That's such a huge deal. I'm fascinated to see where that goes next, and hopefully it's the right way. On the other cases here, so we talk about Jack Smith, also Georgia. You've got the Fani Willis fiasco continuing. down there. It's, of course, taking a lot of time given all of her problems. To what extent does the immunity case really jeopardize her ability to prosecute Trump in any capacity?
Yeah, a lot of what she indicted Trump for are clearly immune acts. I mean, this guts her case. Now, look, that case is currently held up while we litigate the issue of Fani Willis's disqualification. If she's disqualified at this point, I think any fair prosecutor appointed to replace her would just dismiss the case. I don't think they have a case. But in the meantime, that case is on a slow boat to nowhere. And certainly this immunity decision takes any wind out of the sails that may have existed there. I mean, that case is as close to dead as you can be.
It's just remarkable how all of this has gone, and it's really unfortunate that it had to get here. Will Scharf, as always, really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.